In 2001, the U.S. Defense Department selected Lockheed Martin and its F-35 design to deliver the Joint Strike Fighter. Since then, the program has endured more than its share of ups and downs. Now, opinion on the program is divided between critics, who say it remains an expensive boondoggle that will never work, and those who say not only has the program overcome its challenges, it's now emerged as a vital piece of the U.S. arsenal. So in 2025, what is the reality of the F-35? Breaking Defense has assembled a roundtable to discuss this very topic, both about where the jet is now and where it's going in the future. And that discussion starts right now.
All right, so for years, the F-35 has been both the punching bag of critics of the Pentagon and also really the featured jet for the Pentagon, seen as the future of air power for many years and then the present of air power. I guess, Michael, let's start with you with kind of a big picture question, which is, where is the F-35 in the year 2025?
Well, that description you gave at the beginning is kind of still the case, except for the fact that it's fair to say now that the F-35 is pretty much the world's dominant fighter. 19 customers and counting, over 1,000 produced to date, and really what air forces around the world are calling the backbone of their warfighting capability. There's still plenty of developmental problems and things of that nature that we'll get into, but the program is definitely a lot more mature than it was a decade ago.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, JJ, you were involved in early discussions with the F-35, been tracking this program of all of us the longest.
That's a very nice way of saying old.
I was trying to be generous, but so, I mean, you've seen this thing develop over the decades. I mean, what's your take on kind of where it is now?
While it is, as Michael said, the predominant fighter in the world today, you have to look at all the runway it used to get there, because the early days of the F-35 were incredibly fraught. This program was fundamentally broken by two decisions that were taken now more than 30 years ago. One was by the contractor and the Department of Defense, who believed that simulation had gotten so good, you wouldn't learn much in actual test. So they arranged a schedule with high what's called concurrency, where you're building and testing at the same time. That's great if you're not learning anything in testing. It's terrible if you learn something in test, because then you have to go back and fix all the jets you've already built. But that wasn't the big original sin on F-35. That belongs to the United States Congress. In 1994's Defense Authorization Act, the Congress looked around and said, Marine Corps, you're working on a Stovall, sort of a mid-sized fighter. Navy and Air Force, you're working on the Common Affordable Lightweight Fighter, sort of a mid-sized fighter. Why are we doing two programs for one airplane? Make one airplane do both jobs. And suddenly the technical requirements for F-35 got much more complicated. And because the Marines needed their jets first, their Harriers were timing out, you had to design the hardest version first and make that work. Normally in an aircraft development program, you start with the easy and work your way up.
Right.
Here, they were in the deep end from the beginning, and that led to lots of challenges on the weight side and on the performance side that the program took more than a decade to overcome.
And we should note, of course, there's the three variants. There's the A, which is the Air Force variant, the B, the Stovall, which the Marines use, and then the C, which is more of a carrier-based variant. Val, I guess let's start kind of looking at, what's going well right now for the program.
I mean, I think that it is, from a market perspective, it's single engine, which, typically you would think it's easier to maintain, less expensive, and compared to an F-15EX, roughly equivalent in price. So it makes a lot of sense for people to buy. From a market perspective, it does quite well. It competes very, very well. To your point, JJ, you kind of have these problems that, they pop up, the JPO has to fix them, and spends all of this money and energy to do so. And then you kind of get these other things that have been chronically underinvested in the program, things like sustainment, software, Block 4 modernization. So every time the program takes, one big step forward, it takes another two back, or it has these other things that aren't going so well. The time that it's just taking for everything to be perfect is just way longer than anyone could ever have seen.
So let's talk a little bit about where it goes from here. Block 4 is kind of the biggest bugaboo on the horizon here. What is Block 4?
Block 4 is essentially the program's plan to iteratively upgrade the fighter over the course of several years. It can look like a lot of different types of capabilities, from being able to carry more weapons, to better sensors, and everything in between. So the Block 4 plan, initially, we were talking before we started shooting that years ago, the program hoped to have it pretty much done around now. That's not looking like it's going to be the case until the end of the decade. And exactly how many capabilities and what exactly will be included in the Block 4 plan right now, as far as we know, is still in flux. Last year, the program manager, Air Force General Schmidt, talked about reimagining Block 4. And another way to read that is reducing the amount of capabilities that will ultimately be included to make the upgrade plan more realistic. So right now, Lockheed is talking about anywhere from 75 or beyond number of capabilities. I think, you can probably treat that as a floor, but it could be less, could be more. We'll have to see.
The other aspect of politics that I just want to touch on briefly, Val, is the question of the current geopolitical environment, let's call it. And we've already seen Canada, say, hey, we're going to reevaluate whether we want to get more F-35s. We've seen some officials in other countries make similar comments, nothing quite as official as the Canadian statement. How much of a concern do we think this is going to be going forward for this program?
I think that there are two different ways to look at it. And if you talk to different experts, you're going to get different opinions. So I think one way to look at it is, this is a calamity that people are starting to doubt that America will be there, that America can be depended on, and that it's causing them to rethink the F-35, or, possibly new customers might not consider it as good of an option as they once would have. But I think there's another side of this, another group of people who might say, look, people can just kind of wait this out. They can say, look, we're not going to buy any jets. We're going to weigh our options and see if the political winds change. They might say, don't be too hasty in looking at Canada and say they're going to, drop out of the program. From a market or investor perspective, it's not going to be great for Lockheed Martin these next couple of years in terms of what sort of an impact that has on the F-35 program, because there are these questions. It is less assured than it was a year ago, because the F-35 is such a singular product. There's a very real possibility that this does blow over and the program kind of moves forward. I don't know, JJ, do you agree?
Well, the F-35 has tremendous capabilities and countries love that fact, but it's also unprecedented in another way, in that it is a walled garden, right? Mm-hmm. If you're on the inside, you're on the inside, but it also means that you are reliant on the United States for parts, you're reliant on the United States for sustainment. All of the data from your aircraft goes back to the United States to get processed. The question is, do countries believe that the United States will allow them to operate an F-35 in the way that they wish to, for the missions that they wish to, or is a suddenly different United States going to try and restrict them somewhat? The other thing that gets to that point is the success of the aircraft. Right now, there's a huge order book for F-35 from around the world, many more aircraft than they can actually build. Right now, Lockheed has a cap of 156 per year. In order to fulfill the outstanding order book on a reasonable schedule, they'd have to be building at 175 to 180 per year. Will countries look at that line and say, I have to get at the back of that line if I order now, or I can go buy a GCAP, Global Combat Air Program, next generation aircraft for something like the same cost? There are more options than there used to be.
One of the biggest sources of tension on this program has been how much control the customer has over the aircraft. This is a program that was developed with the TSPR mentality, Total System Performance Responsibility, which essentially means that the contractor has a lot more responsibility in actually delivering on what the aircraft needs to do from a performance perspective. So I think something that you could see as a result of this new geopolitical environment is increased pressure by the customer on the contractor to have more what's called organic control over the aircraft. That customers are clearly concerned, will the United States supply parts or software if customers have more control. I think one example maybe is the Israeli Air Force operates with a lot more independence on this program than other customers do. Do you see that same model being followed? And if that's the case, what does that do to Lockheed's returns on the program? Sustainment is a very lucrative, if not the most lucrative part of this program. So I think those things will be in flux and will definitely be something to watch for.